Generally, free-to-play games aren't something that interests me. The sheer mention of the phrase is enough to give me nightmares of in-your-face microtransactions and having to wait hours or days for any form of task to complete. For me, that isn't gaming. Nor was it ever what video games were supposed to be. From time to time I do come across a free-to-play game that grabs my attention, and on an even rarer occasion, the format is at least to some marginal degree correct in its workings. And the game we're looking at today is one such title. Walking Zombie 2 is a free-to-play first-person shooter with heavy RPG elements. It is developed and published by indie developer Alda Games, and released on Steam October 11, 2019 for PC. Despite having started life on mobile, Walking Zombie 2 transitioned to PC reasonably well. It offers a huge amount of generally enjoyable content and solid combat, along with RPG elements with a combined inspiration from Fallout, Borderlands and Resident Evil, but suffers a large array of bugs along with needing a lot of polish and in some cases having unfinished mechanics. Before we get started, I'd like to note that there is a performance bug that affects a small number of players, where their frame rate will lock at 15 frames per second for most of the game. Unfortunately, I am one of the few experiencing this issue, but the developer has stated they hope to fix it soon, possibly with the big update on December 13th. With that out of the way, let's get started. In Walking Zombie 2 you take on the role of The Chosen, a 20-year-old man whose mother was infected with the zombie virus upon giving birth to him, making him immune and unable to turn into one. The game starts off 20 years in the past just before The Chosen is born, and upon his mother giving birth she turns into a zombie, killing most of the group in the process. The only one that survives is the Elder, who takes the baby and brings it up under his care. It is 20 years later where the events of the game take place. Essentially the goal of the game is to attempt to find a cure for the virus, by searching the world for a scientist who is capable of creating one. The Chosen's mission to find such a person takes him across the world to various towns where he'll need to help the many people living in them with a large variety of problems. The actual plot to the game is a bit convoluted. At first your mission is made out to be a case of finding all the science bases scattered throughout the world. Then somewhere along the way there is a mention of finding a cure, but that is about it. There isn't any clarification with the plots whatsoever. It just pops up every once in a while before disappearing again, with the focus being on the problems of the town that you're currently in. If I was to compare Walking Zombie 2's plot to anything, it would be the Borderlands series, where while there is a plot to be had, most of the intrigue and general fun of the writing comes from the characters, side quests and subplots as opposed to the main plot itself. Every once in a while there is a mention to the main plot, but it acts more as a reminder than it being the driving force behind the writing. For what the main plot objective lacks is more than made up for with the generally great subplots that occur within each of the towns. While the writing won't blow you away, it gives plenty for those looking for a plot to enjoy. There are also cutscenes throughout the game which are actually very well made for an indie game. The voice acting does sound like a case of whoever was in the office that day got the role, but in a strange way it kind of works. It's like watching a B-movie horror, and I think that is where a lot of the inspiration came from. With the at times wacky world that is Walking Zombie 2, the voice acting works really well at fitting in. Very professionally done voice acting just wouldn't feel the same. It's one of those cases of it being so bad it's good. If there was to be one issue I would have with the plot right now, it would be that in the third town, the progression is currently only half implemented. This means that halfway through the story of the City of the Sun, the plot progression just stops, leaving you waiting for the next update that promises to finish it. Most of the side quests too are missing from this chapter. With the game being free to play, I don't mind the fact that not all the chapters in their plot are implemented. My issue however lays with the fact of leaving it half finished. I would rather the plot progression stopped at the end of the second chapter and then played the third one from start to finish upon its full implementation. Because there's so much missing from that chapter, it also starts to affect the rest of the game too, which we'll get to in more detail soon. As a whole, despite its issues, the plot generally works with its very B-movie horror voice acting, along with fitting in with the general charm and sometimes outrageousness that the game possesses. It won't be to everyone's tastes, and it certainly isn't groundbreaking or perfect story writing, but it is bound to give a few chuckles and make the world of Walking Zombie 2 an interesting enough place to explore. Walking Zombie 2's gameplay is a blend between first-person shooting and an RPG system that works very similar to that of the Fallout series, with skill points and perks mixed with the quest system and general sense of humour of the Borderlands series. We'll start with the character development and level up system. As you progress through the game and complete quests, you will gain experience points. The further in the game you get, the more experience quests will give you. Upon obtaining enough experience points, you will level up. Each time you level up you gain 5 skill points, and with every 3 levels you gain a perk. The skill points can be placed into any of the skills as you see fit, with skills including health, defense, firearms, melee weapons, laser weapons, curing, lockpicking, and so on and so forth. Each skill can be increased to a total level of 200, with the higher they are, the more effective they become. For example, the higher your firearm skill is, the more damage you deal with firearms. The higher your lockpicking is, the easier it becomes to pick locks. And the higher curing is, the better effect you have with healing items. There are also skill books that can be randomly dropped by killing zombies or bought from shops. These books can then be used to increase the skill they are associated with by 2 to 5 points. To say that the skill system of Walking Zombie 2 shares similarities to Fallout would be an understatement. In fact, it's almost an exact copy. Regardless of its similarities, it does exactly the job that you would expect it to, just on a smaller scale to that of what it inspires from. It is a system that gives freedom in character development, allowing you to increase whatever skills you wish, with your character changing depending on the skills you choose to increase. You can have an all-out damage dealing character, a charismatic one who has a high speech for additional dialogue options, though they are nothing significant, a tank style character along with plenty of hybrid variations too. The downfall with the skills is that a fair few of them are not really all that useful to increase. Lockpicking and hacking, for example, are extremely easy without increasing the skills, so you're better off placing the skill points into something else. The same applies to the outdoorsman skill, that increases the chance of avoiding random encounters. Random encounters aren't all that common, and when you do come across them, they're often rewarding enough that it is worth facing them as opposed to avoiding them. Laser weapons are almost non-existent in the game at the moment unless you purchase them for real money. There is only one energy weapon I found in the entire game without having to spend money, and even then I couldn't really use it until almost 30 hours into the game because none of the shops until that point sold the ammo for it. The driving skill becomes redundant if you purchase the $9.95 Ultimate Steam Edition, as upon buying that, the restrictions to the game are removed, which is what this skill applies to. We'll get to the game's restrictions in more detail shortly. Defense is a bit pointless as your character is already a tank just from armor alone, to the point that I didn't die once in the 30 hours I put into the game. And finally, the melee weapon skill is pretty pointless too, as the game has so much ammunition, especially if you use your weapons and ammo in a clever manner. You'll never run out, resulting in you never needing to use melee weapons at all. As a whole, the skills do give character development in the game, but at the moment so many of them have such little effect or just become outright redundant that it isn't worth the time to place skill points into them. Right now, the only skills that are worth investing points into are firearms, speech, curing, radiation resistance, and trading. A bit of an increase to your health is useful too. But other than those skills, the rest isn't all that well designed or have enough of an impact in the game right now that they're worth placing skill points into them. This results in a skill system that is greatly lacking in any major depth, lowering the overall potential complexity of the character development. Then there are the perks. As previously mentioned, you gain a new perk for every 3 times your character levels up. Perks grant you additional abilities and various increases to your overall character in some form or another. As a few examples of perk, you have animal language that allows you to speak to animals, granting additional side quests and dialogue that would otherwise be unavailable. Reading is required in order to read and use skill books. Scavenger increases the value of all scrap you find. Steady aim, which lowers the spread of your shooting, and many more. Much like the skills, some of the perks are extremely useful while others are not. Perks like fast hands for faster reloading, bookworm for a higher increase to skill points from books, reading, and scavenger, along with few others, are all very useful to have. However, others like hacker and lockpicker, just like their skill equivalent, aren't very useful as the minigames are both already actually very easy. Berserker, which increases your damage by 20% when your health is low, isn't all that useful as it isn't often your health will ever reach such a level. The cat perk, which results in your last hit before death not killing you, again like Berserker doesn't have much effect. I didn't die once in the entirety of the game. And then there's the nothing perk, which is literally what it says it is, and grants nothing, though this is added more as a joke than anything else. There are also perks just like with the skills that apply to the restrictions of the game, and if you purchase the Ultimate Steam Edition, they, just like their skill counterparts, become redundant too. With only a handful of perks genuinely being useful, you end up eventually just picking out and using certain perks for the sake of there being nothing else of use to you. This then results in the perks losing their sense of reward and satisfaction after a certain point, and leveling up just isn't as exciting at later levels because of it. Much like the skills, the perk system is very hit and miss, with it being great in some regards but not in others. While on the topic of perks, it is also worth mentioning now as opposed to later, there are also super perks. You unlock the ability to learn these special and very powerful perks about midway through the game, where they can be purchased through the super perk coach. These perks require premium currency, in this game's case that being gold coins, in order to buy them. The game is very generous with giving you gold coins however, so it isn't really a problem, and you aren't forced to buy these coins with real money, though it is of course an option. but I'll get into the microtransaction side of things later. The super perks include abilities like Zombie Hunter, where you gain 10 silver coins as standard games currency for every 10 zombies you kill, Badass, where you receive 1 experience point per zombie kill, and I Am a Zombie, where the detection range of zombie enemies is lowered, resulting in them not noticing you and becoming aggroed at shorter distances. There are others, but these would be the most useful of them. The super perks cost between 100 and 300 gold coins each and do not require a perk point in order to learn them, you just need the price. The super perks are a real game changer, particularly the ones with experience and money gains. Up until you get these, the only way to gain experience is through completing quests, and the only way of getting money is through loot, quests, finding treasure, and opening safes. The difference may seem minuscule on paper, but when you actually have them, you do see the difference as you play. The super perks are a great addition, and it is fantastic to see that they're not difficult to obtain or hidden behind paywalls. Unlike with the skills and the standard perks, all the super perks are useful in their own right, and are worth the effort of saving up and buying. They really make a difference, and in some ways make up for what the standard perks are lacking in. As you level up, you gain rewards. These rewards include ammunition, grenades, treasure maps, and all other manners of useful items. From level 1 to 10, you are granted a reward each time you level up. From level 10 to 50, a reward is gained every second level, and from 50 onwards you receive a reward every 5 levels. The rewards are great to receive, as getting additional supplies is always useful. However, I wish they were more impacting, and that more rewarding gifts were given for reaching particular milestones. Early in the leveling, you gain an option between picking out a rifle or a sawn-off shotgun, but it is only in this one instance that you get such a choice. A few more of these options for reaching particular milestones would make the whole system all the more worthwhile, as after a while you already have so many supplies that it starts to lose its impact. Giving the player a new weapon upon reaching a specific level wouldn't affect the balance in any regard. If anything, such a reward is needed in the later game. It is a system that does the job, I just wish it was more satisfying at the later levels. As a whole, the leveling up and character development of Walking Zombie 2 is adequate. It works reasonably well while giving the player a fair amount of freedom with how to build up their character. The downside is that there are skills and perks that are just not all that useful, and if the Steam Ultimate Edition is purchased, it just makes some entirely redundant altogether. It is a system that is rewarding enough and will keep you playing, but certainly has been done far better in other games. Next, we move on to the game progression and quest system. In Walking Zombie 2, much like with Borderlands, your progression is entirely based on quests. You cannot go to any location, and no new locations are unlocked without first having a quest that revolves around going to that place. At the start of the game, you'll be in the woodland, a small community of survivors struggling to get by. It is a small enough area with a handful of locations to travel to while embarking on quests. It is a great introduction area that doesn't take too long before moving on to the next. Upon finishing up in the woodlands, you move on to Springfield, and no, there is no relation between this Springfield and The Simpsons. Here the people are caught in a war of survival that is led by a mayor who shares a remarkable resemblance to a particular controversial political real-world leader that has plans to build a wall around the city, with some of the citizens being very unhappy with it. The third city is the City of the Sun, a military desert city that is having as much trouble with bandits as they are with the zombies. Each of the locations offers its own unique places that you'll be sent to on various tasks and quests, from science bases to zombie-filled streets and buildings to sewers to airfields to a church and graveyard. There really aren't many forms of places you don't go at some point or another. You do often return to each of the locations for specific quests, which can be a bit repetitive. This is especially the case in the woodlands, but you wouldn't go back to the same locations so often that it would become tiresome. There is a good balance there. It is with travelling from location to location where the restrictions of the free version of the game take place. Basically, to travel to any location you need fuel. The further the location is, the more fuel it will consume. At the start of the game, at least for the woodland area, the amount of fuel needed is quite small, and you gain enough as rewards that you don't run out at this stage of the game. However, once you leave the woodland area, you will begin to run out of fuel quite often. Each day you do get a free 70-litre refill, and you can occasionally buy fuel from traders for silver coins, but not enough that it would give you constant play. As previously mentioned, there are perks and a skill that helps with the consumption levels, but even with them it won't stop you running out. This results in you either needing to buy the Ultimate Steam Edition of the game for $9.95 or having to wait until the next day for your free fuel. If you find that you're greatly enjoying the game, I would say that the one-time payment for the Ultimate Steam Edition is well worth its price. You get unlimited play along with an extra 20 backpack slots, and on top of that you gain 10 gold coins each time you level up too. I suppose you could say it's like buying the game. I purchased it and I can't say I was disappointed. It enabled me to continue playing as much as I liked. If I didn't, I'd probably be still attempting to review this game next year. With that said, however, it is completely possible to play the game full without buying the Steam edition. and later in the game it is possible to actually craft fuel, but you will still be finding yourself regularly stuck and having to return each day to play the whole thing through. The number of quests that the game has is quite remarkable. If I was to give an estimate, I'd say it'd be close to about 150, maybe 200. Quests generally revolve around finding a particular item, killing a specific number of enemies, and completing a specific task of some kind. The variation between the quests is very small and does give the sense of repetition, but none are lengthy in a way that you would become bored, and there is just about enough slight change with the details and purpose behind the quests that monotony is kept at bay. Don't expect any form of quests that are of a grand or epic scale, as there isn't any, but there is just enough to keep things rolling without it feeling like you're treading familiar ground the whole time. If there was to be one issue, it would be that, like previously mentioned when discussing the plot, a lot of the quests and content of the City of the Sun are yet to be implemented. The content that is there is feeling very lacking, and it really slows down the leveling up system and upsets the general balance with the combat, as getting money for new equipment is much more of a struggle due to the missing quest lines. But other than that, the quests are enjoyable enough and you're bound to get a chuckle at some of the adventures you embark on. When travelling from place to place, there is a chance that a random encounter will occur. Each time a random encounter pops up, you have the choice to avoid or face the encounter. The chance of you avoiding it is based on your outdoorsman skill and your vehicle's camouflage rating. Encounters can include a horde of zombies, a horde of zombie dogs, or a group of bandits. But there are other more unique encounters, such as a special building like the House of Horrors, the 3 safes, where there are literally 3 safes in the middle of the road for you to open and loot, and even in some cases there is nothing more than poo in the middle of the road. But that is just some of the encounters. More often than not, the encounters are worth facing, as usually there is some form of loot to be found, and in most cases at least a safe to be opened, making them all the more rewarding when you find them. There are also certain encounters that offer unique equipment in a similar fashion to the Fallout games. They are a nice addition and do add an element of surprise and reward when travelling around the world map, and with so many variations you never know what you're going to encounter. Then there is the open world segment of the game. The open world location is a separate part of the game that works entirely different from that of the rest, but don't be fooled by its name. It isn't exactly like that of what the name would suggest. Basically, this part of the game is where you get to build your own little settlement. The building up of the settlement revolves around upgrading the level of the various buildings located there, with each one having its own specific purpose. Along with that, there are areas to explore outside of the settlement, each of which is randomly generated, and each having their own points of interest along with loot to be found. But these areas are only open for a certain amount of time, and new ones take time before they'll be open. Buildings in your settlement are the base camp, trading office, hospital, radio station and gas lab. The base camp is the general level of your settlement and is required in order to keep increasing the level of all your other buildings. The trading office acts as a trading station where each day offers will come in where an NPC character is looking for specific supplies in exchange for either silver or gold coins. These supplies include fuel, food and medical supplies. The more supplies and the higher the value of the supplies, the more money you will receive for the trade deal. The higher the level of the building, the more trade deals that come in each day, along with there being a reduction in the amount of time it takes for more trade deals to appear. The radio station opens up areas to explore outside of the settlement. The higher the radio station level is, the more areas that are open to explore. Along with each area having more loot, the longer you have to search the area and unlocking of new locations for the RNG to generate in. The hospital acts as a respawn point if you die while exploring outside of the settlement. The higher the level the hospital is, the more health you will have upon respawning. The gas lab allows you to craft fuel cans from scavenged fuel remains and water found while exploring the areas outside of the settlement. The higher the level of the gas lab, the more fuel cans you can craft at one time, along with crafting time for each being reduced. Each of the upgrades to the buildings requires either silver or gold coins. With silver coins, the upgrade takes a certain amount of time to complete, generally between 15 minutes and an hour for the early levels, while spending gold coins instantly levels up the building. The whole idea with the settlement is generally a good one that brings a ton of new content to the game that gives additional ways of getting money both standard and premium, not to mention making things a bit easier for those who are looking to play the game without spending a cent. The crafting of the gas cans certainly helps and will give you additional play each day, but it won't stop you from running out completely. So there is definitely that to keep in mind. And it is also here that the super perk coach is located, and you can start buying them with new perks becoming available each day. But let's get to the actual meat of this feature, and that is the exploration of the areas outside of the settlement. Basically how this works is that each day upon loading up the game there will be a number of areas to explore based on your radio station level. The higher the level of the radio station, the more that will be available. You will have a certain amount of time to enter and explore these areas before they expire and close becoming unavailable. It takes about 3 or 4 hours before a new location will appear. Each of these locations are randomly generated and vary in what types of places are located at each, which are referred to as points of interest, along with the size of the map, how many enemies are on the map, the amount of loot is to be found, and how much radiation you will find scattered around the place. The scale of each of these factors can be anything from small to huge. Your objective with each of these areas is to find as much loot as possible. With each second that goes by, more and more loot will disappear and become unobtainable. This is all the while keeping yourself alive from the hordes of the dead that roam the area. Loot of all kinds can be found, including skill books, scrap, food, medical supplies, ammunition, grenades, and so on and so forth, all of which can be kept for yourself, sold to traders, or traded at the trading outpost. Loot is found in shipping containers, chests, lockers, back of cars, and all sorts of other containers, and sometimes even in the open. Points of interest, as they're referred to, are unique areas that are generated into the map, with new ones unlocking the higher your radio station level is. These areas include buildings such as houses, churches, military bases, and warehouses, along with treehouse hideouts, plane crashes, shooting ranges, and mazes, just to name a few. Each of these locations has loot to be found, with some requiring you to dig with a shovel to find some of it. The concept of the randomly generated open world maps is quite an exciting one that breaks up the gameplay from the standard linearity that comes with the main part of the game. The idea of exploring zombie-filled maps in search of loot is always exciting. However, with that said, this is by far the least polished feature of the game, to the point that it feels rather unrefined and unfinished. There are bugs to be found, along with the whole idea of the loot disappearing and decreasing over time being a rather strange design choice for a mechanic that limits how many areas are available at a time. At present, the game isn't calculating the amount of loot available in an area correctly in any shape or form. There have been times where the loot value counter has shown there is loot remaining, while other times it has shown that the value is in the minus, while it is only further decreasing with each piece of loot I found. Therefore, if the counter says there's no loot left, the chances are there still is. Upon arriving at the shooting range point of interest, you will find a gate that is locked with a locker behind it. Upon trying to open it, it instructs you to find a key, but there doesn't appear to be a key to be found, despite having searched the area thoroughly several times. Then there is the decrease of loot on a map, which lowers over time. I understand that the point of this is to keep the player moving and giving each map a sense of challenge and urgency. However, with the number of maps being so limited, and the amount of time for a new map to spawn being 3 or 4 hours, it isn't very beneficial to the player. Saving up silver coins is time consuming enough, and the price you get for the loot compared to that of the actual value is only about 1/4. So for example, an item with a value of 1000, you will likely only get around 250 silver coins when selling it. This alone decreases the overall value on the maps, let alone the amount of loot lowering over time. It is a strange design choice, and one that doesn't make exploring these maps as satisfying and enjoyable as they could be. Of course, that is if and when the actual value counter works correctly, which it doesn't appear to be doing. Along with that, the whole system just feels unfinished. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it is lacking and needs something more to bring the whole thing together, not to mention a large number of fixes and overall balancing. It is a system that certainly works from a functionality standpoint, and it is quite enjoyable, but it is still a ways off from being genuinely well designed. Then there are the hacking and lockpicking minigames that are required to gain access through computerized locked doors and for opening the locks of safes. You can really see the Bethesda inspiration in the design of these minigames, with the hacking being a very simplified and dumbed down version of Fallout's hacking mechanic, while the lockpicking is a simplified version of Oblivion's. For hacking, there are 3 horizontal blue lines, each with a small horizontal yellow line within them. There is a vertical yellow pointer in each too. As you hack each of the lines, the vertical pointer will move from left to right. The more difficult the system is, the faster the pointer will move. All you need to do is press the spacebar when the pointer is within the yellow line. Succeed with all 3 and you will hack the system. Fail and you'll get an electric shock, dealing minor damage to you. When lockpicking, you will notice 5 pins with the lockpick moving right to left. The objective here is to use the lockpick to push all the pins up. This is done by pressing the spacebar when the point of the lockpick is underneath the pins. The more difficult the lock is, the faster the lockpick will move. Once you've pushed all the pins up, the lock will open. If you press the spacebar too soon and don't hit a pin, the lockpick may break. There are 3 types of lockpicks in total, those being basic, super and ultra. Basic picks have a 70% chance to break, super picks have a 50% chance to break, and ultra picks have a 30% chance to break. With lockpicks being so plentiful and the design and the mechanic being so simple, the chances of you ever running out of lockpicks are extremely slim. While simple by design, the mechanics function perfectly fine, and for an indie game, honestly, not much more could be asked for with their complexity. And due to their simplicity, it never takes any more than about 5 to 10 seconds to complete them, making them quick and reasonably fun if you enjoy such minigames. As you progress in your journey, you will receive treasure maps as rewards, which when used adds a marker to the treasure on your map. Alternatively, you can also purchase treasure maps from traders on occasion. Upon reaching the marker, the game will load the location and you'll need to seek out the red circle, which is the area that the treasure is buried. Once you reach the area, you simply need to equip a shovel and start digging until you find the chest containing the treasure. The treasure generally includes a large sum of silver coins, grenades, medical supplies and a handful of gold coins. The amount of loot in a chest increases the further in the game you progress. There are 3 types of shovels, with each one giving an increase to the effectiveness of digging. The better the shovel, the larger area each dig will uncover, and the faster you will find the treasure. The treasure hunting is a nice little addition to the game that helps break up the gameplay a bit, all the while being rewarding to embark on and find. At the start of the game it is quite slow due to the basic shovel and its low effectiveness, but once you start getting the better shovels it becomes far less of a chore. Near the start of the game you unlock the ability to accept repeatable quests from a character called Ace. These quests can be accepted and repeated as often as you like, with you gaining experience and silver coins for each one you complete. The quests available change depending on what area you're in. Along with each new city you visit, the rewards getting bigger. The quests revolve around killing a specific number of zombie waves. Sometimes this is done on foot, other times it involves using a sniper rifle from a vantage point, manning a machine gun, or rocket launching turret, and in the City of the Sun, even a mortar. Each of the quests have a difficulty rating starting from easy to hard. The higher the difficulty, the bigger the rewards, though the difficulty doesn't have any effect on how easy or challenging a quest is. The number of zombies and waves you need to kill is exactly the same regardless. The repeatable quests are fun, though a bit more variety would be nice. The rewards are useful if you're low on money and in need of supplies, even if the rewards are a bit low, making it slow progress. It is great that the option is there, but I never really found the need to complete them, and it was more of a case of doing them for the sake of it as opposed to needing to do it, as I was never short of medical supplies or ammunition. A bit more variety to the quest and some better rewards would certainly bring the mechanic to the next level. As for dealing with the traders, this works a bit different from how most other games work. As opposed to having new inventory each time you enter the town, the trader's inventory changes based on a timer. Roughly every 3 or 4 hours a trader will get a completely new inventory. This means any ammo or supplies that you buy will remain gone, with no more coming in until the timer is reset. It is clear that the purpose behind this restriction is to encourage the purchase of premium currency, which can be used to buy supplies and ammo through the premium store. But again, as previously stated, supplies and ammo were never much of an issue for me. If I ran out of ammo, I just switched to a different weapon with a different ammo type, and I never found myself in such danger that my gaining of medical supplies was higher than that of their consumption. It does, however, make getting new weapons quite tedious, as you're waiting for the next lot of stock to spawn, and even then you have to hope that the shop stocks the weapon you're looking for. On top of that, in the City of the Sun, the weapons are extremely expensive, with some of them being around 45,000 coins. Though that can be lowered to about 35,000 each with a high trading skill. And right now, with a large percentage of quests still to be implemented, getting the money together to purchase them is a real grind. I can't say I like how the shops are designed in any shape or form. While you can lower the costs when buying items, you can't increase the amount you get when selling them. And the difference between what you get and the value of the item is quite extreme, resulting in imbalance. It's obvious they're designed purposely to attempt to get you to fork out money, but with a bit of patience and willpower you can escape that trap very easily. Once you reach Springfield, you will be given the opportunity to purchase a total of 2 houses, one big one and one small one, with the City of the Sun having another small house up for grabs when you reach that stage of the game. These houses come with crafting tables. The small house has 2 tables and the big house has 3, with each of the tables crafting a particular item. One table is for ammunition, one for medical supplies, and the other for chemicals such as temporary boosters and radiation resistance increasers. Like most things with Walking Zombie 2, the crafting table works on a timer, with it taking about an hour for an item to craft. You can upgrade the tables to decrease crafting time, along with how many of an item it makes at a time, for a price of silver coins, starting off at 2,500 and increasing with each upgrade. Each upgrade increases the number of items a crafting cycle makes by 1, and each decrease to the crafting time is 10 minutes up to a total of 30. The crafting tables, while nice to have, feels like a very half-assed excuse for a crafting system that was put in for the sake of having something that could be considered crafting in a zombie game. Most of the time I ended up forgetting about them and didn't bother using them at all, as I already had all the supplies I needed without having to visit the tables every hour. While it would be a lot more work from a development standpoint, a proper crafting system would be very welcome, as the crafting tables just don't do anything to add to the gameplay at all. It is also possible to upgrade and customize your vehicles and weapons in the game too. Vehicles can be upgraded from the entrance of a city, but you can only upgrade the one you are currently using. If you want to upgrade another one, you will first need to switch to it. Weapons are upgraded from the schematics table found in your own settlement and in the City of the Sun. With vehicles you can upgrade the speed, lower the fuel consumption, again only useful for those looking to play without making a payment, and increasing the camouflage. Speed naturally increases how quick you travel from place to place, while camouflage increases your chance of avoiding a random encounter if you wish to do so. Both of these can be upgraded 3 times and cost silver coins. The lowering of fuel consumption, however, requires gold coins in order to upgrade, and a hefty amount too, starting at 240. There are 3 vehicles in total, which are the bike that you start the game off with, the truck that you get in Springfield and the buggy that you get in the City of the Sun. Only the truck and buggy is possible to upgrade. However, there are other vehicles in the game that can be purchased with real money. Along with the upgrades, it is also possible to change the skin design of the vehicles at the cost of 30 gold coins each. Upgrading weapons works in the exact same way, where you can increase the damage, rate of fire and lower how long it takes to reload. The upgrading of the reload speed and rate of fire costs silver coins, while the upgrade to damage requires gold coins. You can also apply various skins to each of the weapons too for the same cost as that of the vehicles. The upgrade system of vehicles and weapons is reasonably well designed. It is simple and the boosts it provides do indeed help. But I very much dislike the fact that specific upgrades cost premium currency as opposed to there being an option between silver and gold, a lot like how the settlement works. Indeed, as I previously mentioned, the game is fairly generous with gold coins. With so many different things to spend those coins on, a choice between gold and silver for such upgrades would be much better suited. As you progress through the game, you'll face off against a variety of different zombies. These include the standard shambling zombie, the puker that spits out balls of toxic goo, the quarterback which is a fast running zombie, and zombie dogs. Along with the standard zombies, there are also huge bosses that you encounter every once in a while throughout the game, each of which are completely unique to any other. The different zombie types bring just about enough variation to keep things interesting enough, with each of them behaving in their own unique manner, requiring you to change tactics in accordance with what ones you're dealing with. The problem is, none of them are really all that dangerous, and easily killed before they even get close to you. The quarterback is about the only one that would present any form of danger due to their quick advancement, but with a few shots to the head or a close shotgun blast to the face, they quickly fall, leaving little challenge throughout the whole game. Even the bosses, despite their impressive and intimidating appearance, are easy to avoid and quick enough to dispatch, with some of them being far too easy. There's definitely an imbalance with some of the mid to late stage bosses and should be looked into to provide some form of balance. Indeed, you do face off against bandits, who offer some form of additional challenge due to them using weapons, with them being more frequent the further you progress in the game. But with supplies being so plentiful and their AI being extremely simple, they are easy to overcome and don't present any real form of danger. Overall, there is just enough variation, but from a difficulty standpoint, it is more of a casual game. As for the combat, I have to admit it is immensely satisfying. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it is probably the best designed feature in the game. There are several types of guns, including pistols, SMGs, assault rifles, sniper rifles and shotguns, all of which are so much fun to use, especially with their sound effects. The level of satisfaction is only further increased by zombies receiving visual damage to particular body parts depending on where you target. For example, aim for the head, half their head will blow off. Shoot the arm, most of it will be shot off. Do enough damage to the torso, you can blow off half their chest or side out, showing a massive hole or their ribcage. Seeing the top half of a zombie's head blow apart or half their chest bursting open revealing their ribcage never gets old. This feature only applies to the zombies, however, and not the bandits. The one downside to the combat is that you know you're playing a game that was originally made for mobile. The mouse movement is quite floaty, and no matter how much you change and adjust the sensitivity, it is always there to some degree, and does take some getting used to. Along with that, the general simple enemy AI and the lack of any form of challenge only further increases that sense of it being a mobile game. With that said, however, it is still enjoyable and a lot of fun. But if you are looking for a true PC FPS experience, Walking Zombie 2 won't provide it. Then there is of course the in-game purchases. The first thing to mention is that Walking Zombie 2 is extremely in your face with various offers of micropayments and the likes. You can't go into your inventory more than 2 or 3 times without something popping up trying to sell you more inventory space, storage space, weapons, perks, gold coins and so on and so forth. Even when you buy the Steam Ultimate Edition for $9.95, the game is still constantly throwing offers and pop-ups at you, trying to entice you to spend money on the game. I understand that the developer has to make money, but after already spending $9.95, they should at the very least be cut down dramatically. Just to get your hourly free gold coins, you need to enter the store where you'll see all the various packs that you can buy. Having them popping up the whole time despite that is just too much. Yes, such pop-ups are considered minor frustrations, but it is like if you were doing your weekly shopping and every aisle you walked through there were people on each end shoving products in your face trying to sell them to you. You wouldn't stand for such behaviour in real life, and you certainly shouldn't have to do it in a form of entertainment either. There is a fine line between such things being fair to consumers and just being plain forceful. In Walking Zombie 2's case, it is just being forceful to the highest degree possible. There needs to be a limit, and this game more than crosses it. Then there are the actual prices of the purchases. To start with, you have the Steam Ultimate Edition for $9.95. This particular purchase is fair. as it is essentially purchasing the game, removing any restrictions in regards to the progress. However, that is where the general value ends, and you're going into buying for the sake of it and impatience. There is a Chuck Norris pack that costs $9.95 too, and grants you 20 extra backpack spaces, 30 spaces to your storage, 20 skill points and 4 perk points. The backpack spaces aren't really needed, as with the number of items that the game contains you'll never fill it, especially if you already have the Steam Ultimate Edition. With many of the skills being useless, the skill points aren't needed. You can unlock all the perks by leveling up, and again the storage spaces would never really be needed either. It is a pointless pack that does look enticing at the start of the game, but actually isn't all that it is made out to be. And then there are the $3.95 individual purchases for added perks, skill points, inventory space and storage space too. With the inventory spaces and storage spaces, it is possible to buy them 5 times each. The number of times skill points and perks can be purchased, I believe, is dependent on how many perks are left available and how many skill points it is possible to allocate to skills. For example, at level 61 it is possible for me to purchase a total of 94 of the skill point purchases. They are quite expensive for what they are, and with the number of times it is possible to actually purchase these, it is quite scary to think of the actual total cost. To purchase all these skill points, that alone would be $371.30, which is a bit mad. Then there is the potential to buy unique weapons and vehicles in the game. These each cost $6.95. Yes, you heard me correctly, $6.95 for a weapon or vehicle. And of course one of the weapons is the laser rifle, and purchasing it is the only way to actually get your hands on it. The minigun is another one. Admittedly, some, though not all, of these special weapons can be bought with gold coins, but the cost is almost $1,500, which is equal to almost $15 in value. Getting this amount of coins without spending a single cent would take ages. I'd say I only just barely got that many coins during my entire 30-hour playtime. The general pricing of the purchases is to a point where you can't even call them microtransactions. You wouldn't get away with the prices like this on mobile, and just because it is now on Steam doesn't mean there should be any meteor. Indeed, there are games out there that have high price purchases. An example of this would be Untitled Champions of the Forgotten Realms that loves $15 bundles. But $6.95 for a single weapon or vehicle, $3.95 for a few spaces in your inventory storage? No, it's not worth it. It is too expensive and you aren't getting your money's worth. Not when other countless games have technically the same weapons and vehicles at no extra cost. I don't mind that a free to play game like Walking Zombie 2 has in-game purchases, but the aggressive format and the pricing that game uses is just too extreme. The Steam Ultimate Edition purchase is fair enough, but anything other than that, it starts to get ridiculous. The final thing to discuss is the bugs and general issues with the game. The first thing to talk about is of course the dreaded frame rates bug. Judging from the Steam forum discussions, this is only a problem that occurs to the very few of players, and it affects them in various ways. For me, the game constantly ran at a very jerky 15 frames per second, occasionally increasing to 45 frames in certain circumstances. I had to lower the resolution from 1920 by 1080 down to 1600 by 900 just to get a smooth 20 frames per second. I found for me the trigger was something to do with the lockpicking sequences of the game. I noticed that there are 2 different shades when it comes to lockpicking, one for easier locks and one for harder locks. The harder one takes a very slight darker palette. When I unlocked one of the harder locks, the frame rate would increase to 45, but the moment I unlocked an easier lock, the game would go straight back to 20. A perfect example of a lock that increases the frame rate is the unlocking of the safe in the Mayor of Springfield's office. So it appears, at least from my experience, to be something to do with the difference between the 2 types of locks during lockpicking that is causing this issue. Though fingers crossed, it is one of the 300 plus bug fixes that are expected in the December 13th update. I did also find a slight stutter with the frames in certain locations in the game. They are noticeable but nothing too drastic. The only other bug I found, and those mentioned throughout this review, is while giving a convoy backup from the top of a building in the street. Here you have to use a sniper rifle to kill the zombies that are approaching the convoy. Upon interacting with the rifle to use it, the scope was showing, but the game was registering my shotgun as equipped as opposed to the rifle, making it impossible to kill the zombies. After numerous attempts, it did work as it was supposed to, but failing the quest and having to start over from scratch several times was very frustrating. Other than those issues and others already mentioned, from a performance standpoint and bugs, there are no other problems and the game works perfectly fine in that regard. As a whole, the gameplay to Walking Zombie 2 is a casual experience that is fun and generally enjoyable to play, with the sheer amount of content, features and mechanics being quite impressive. However, it has more than a few questionable design choices, along with at times outright poor design. There are a lot of mechanics and systems that are just lacking and in dire need of tweaking, polishing and general refinement. There's plenty to enjoy with Walking Zombie 2, but there is equally as much that would frustrate and exasperate you at the same time. It is a game that has had more Bethesda influence put into its design than any other, and just like their games, Walking Zombie 2 has a list of issues that size would make Bethesda proud. The atmosphere to Walking Zombie 2 is decent enough. There is always that sense of desolation when embarking on quests and exploring the many areas that you visit in your journey. This is helped by an ambience that is created with a somewhat quiet yet subtly eerie music track that plays in the background, adding a slight sense of horror into the mix too. The game could certainly do with a few more music tracks, particularly some more action-packed tracks for moments of combating large groups of zombies and bandits without losing that post-apocalyptic feeling. But from the perspective of getting that sense of being in a post-apocalyptic world across, it certainly delivers, allowing you to become absorbed into it. This has been by far the largest autopsy I've made since Stellar Tactics last year, if not the longest ever, and what a challenge it has been. Walking Zombie 2 is one of those games where there's a lot to like about it, but equally there are just as many things to dislike about it too. I can't say I've had a bad time with the game, in fact I quite enjoyed myself, but I also can't say that it is well designed. Almost every mechanic and system in the game has a major flaw of some kind, and when you mix that with bugs and performance issues, it would be unrealistic to call it a good game no matter how much fun you have. I absolutely love Walking Zombie 2 to a point that is one of my personal favourites of the year, but that doesn't mean it is good and well designed. Believe it or not, a game doesn't need to be especially good to enjoy it, and that couldn't be any more the truth here. Walking Zombie 2 is a game that is severely lacking, and one that needs a lot more work before it could be considered genuinely good despite the fun it brings. And with that, I give Walking Zombie 2 a 4 out of 10. While Walking Zombie 2 may be in need of a lot of improvement right now, I am hoping that with this big update on December 13th, which promises all sorts of new content, improvements and fixes, the game will get to a point where I can at least call it good. There is so much potential with this one, and I really hope that potential is soon realised, as this could truly be a great game.